Hey everyone, welcome to Past Lives and the Divine. I'm Jina, the host of this podcast. And this podcast is where we hold hands and have conversations about our connection with past lives and our eternal soul's experience and the divine out there, the divine within each of us for healing, reaching our full potential in this life that we came here to Earth to create, and for a little entertainment, of course. So in today's episode number 7, we're talking about my life as a medicine woman, another witch in the woods for me who was stabbed, and that is how I die in this life. So as always, before the death scene, I'll give you a heads up if you'd rather not listen to it. So that is all about today. My intention for this session that I had about a year ago was to get in touch with how does my intuition actually feel in my body. And that was the carpet that we got on for this magic carpet ride. And then the story just kind of unfolds from there. So you'll really enjoy this episode. If you're kind of interested in that, like, what does that look like? What can intuition feel like in your body? Because you might hear what it feels like in my body and be like, oh, that's not what it feels like in my body, but it feels like this instead. So you'll really like this episode if you're kind of into those things, which, hey, you're here. You're probably into those things. So before we dive in today, the next podcast episode, I'm taking listener questions. So I have reached out via email. I get questions in person when I see friends and family. And so I'm just collecting these questions. I'm going to boil them down into certain topics and then talk about them in the next podcast episode. So if you're interested, you can go to pastlivesandthedivine.com/subscribe, enter your email address, and you will get an email from me. And then you can hit reply and send your question to me. I would really, really appreciate it. All right, let's dive in. So gather around the fire, my life as a medicine woman. All right, let's get into it. So I had this past life regression session almost a year ago exactly. So October 2018. It is currently October 2019. So my intention going into this session was simply, you know what? Help me figure out what my intuition feels like in my body. Like, when I'm using my gifts, what does that feel like physically in my body? And that was my intention because I was really in the beginning stages, or pretty close to the beginning stages, of figuring out how I wanted my business as a past life regression or person who facilitates past life regression. And how do I want to go about this business? And I didn't want to go about this business in a way where it was like, you know, the internet kings and queens tell you to run your business like this. So you give this away for free. They sign up on your email list. You market to them, you know, all of that online entrepreneurship BS, essentially. Some of it maybe works. I did not want to go down that route again because I was really feeling like I needed to go within to figure it out. And so I was really on this path of like just starting to really go within in terms of creating a business that's totally fueled by my heart, my soul, my intuition, rather than chasing money, chasing clients, chasing notoriety, chasing followers. And I had already had an incarnation in this life as an entrepreneur where I did that, and it felt like shit after a while. And for me, doing that for almost a decade really just turned out to be like, I woke up and was like, what the fuck is this business? I don't even want to be in this business anymore. So I was really trying to avoid that. But also I was really feeling a little bit blind to when I knew something was my intuition versus is this just fear, irrational fear. And so I was trying to really flush all of that out. And this was one of the past lives that I went down that road and was like, help me kind of figure this out. And I knew within me that I had more power than consciously I could have access to, if that makes any sense. It's kind of hard to put words to it. But I would have people who are like, but how do you know that? Like, you're doing this, how do you know to do that? And it was like, part of me had this feeling of like, well, I don't know, isn't that just kind of what you do? Doesn't everyone know how to do this? Or I would have people who were, say, had some psychic abilities, and they'd be like, I can read everyone in the room but you. What is this? How do you put up that psychic defense? And it'd be like, I don't know. I don't even know I'm doing it. So I really wanted to start tapping into this well of power that I knew was there. And that is not unique to me. We all have that. We all have these intuitive, you can call it psychic if you will, you can call it soul knowing, whatever you call it, we have so much more power than we know of. And we live in a society that really encourages us to give our power away to everyone and everything, and preferably pay someone to do it, right? Consume, feel better is kind of the culture that we live in. And I wanted to opt out of that. And so hopefully you can identify with this, and hopefully it spurs you to maybe tap into your well of knowing even more than you already do. So that was my intention for the session. It was to get more in touch with my psychic abilities, you could say, or my intuition, my heart and soul knowing. What does that feel like in my mind? What does that feel like in my physical body? So that is the intention that we started with. And then, of course, I always add on there, or whatever is for my highest and greatest good. Because if in order to get to that information, I need to access other information first, I'm open to that too. Knowing that I don't know everything, because I'm human and I'm on Earth, and that's the whole point. So that's how we opened it up. Oh, and I will say, in this session, facilitating this session of mine was, again, my friend Allison. And just like every other session, she opened it up by doing the induction, which again is like a guided meditation. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, you all know. Episode 3 is Anatomy of a Past Life Regression session, so you can get all the details of how the session actually unfolds. Whether you want to do a session yourself or you're just simply curious, you can always check out that episode of this podcast. But we started with the induction, and then we opened up to the very first scene of this past life.
Trust the impressions. Take a look around you and describe to me what's going on when you're ready.
I'm little, like maybe two or 3 years old.
Good.
My mom is really tall. She's wearing a black dress, and it's like a really big dress. And I'm like playing in it beside her.
And actually, the way this scene opened up was I was just like kind of wrapped in this like dark, almost velvety material. And what's so cool about a past life regression and a totally different way of thinking than we're used to in regular life is like, in order to get more information, you have to engage with the details. So I opened up in this scene and I was like kind of wrapping and unwrapping myself in this, dark velvety material. And the only thing I can describe it that's familiar in my life was like when I was little, I remember, I don't know if it was at my grandma's or what, but we used to kind of like wrap ourselves in some curtains, and I don't know where it was, but they were like green curtains, and that's what I was seeing. And so if I was just like regular person, wasn't into this stuff, I might be like, oh, I'm pulling from a memory when I was little, what does that have to do with anything? And then I would go, I'm not getting anything. But instead, in a past life regression, the point is in this part where you are experiencing and having details come into your mind, body, spirit of a past life, it's really important that you engage with the details, no matter how weird they might seem, or how irrelevant they might seem, or how they don't go together. But when you engage with the details, then you get a little more. And then you engage with the details, and then you get a little more. So it's really just, I don't know, I think I'm experiencing this. And so I let myself, even though on these recordings, like I've mentioned before, like the facilitator, in this case, Allison, will ask a question, and then you hear me in this recording just right away answering, but I can tell you, I usually clip out, dead air of me, the client, being in the chair being like, what am I seeing here? And this is another example. I think there was probably like a full minute of me just trying to figure out where I was and what I was doing, because I was like wrapped in this material. And so that's what I mean. It was like, okay, instead of just discounting this as a weird memory from childhood, I'm going to keep going with it. So it was like, okay, what am I wrapped in? Okay, it's dark color. It feels almost velvety. And then it was like, oh, I'm beside someone who's super tall. Oh, that's my mom. Not my mom in this life, but my mom in that life. And it was like, I'm super short, so, because I was like a toddler. And so she seemed really tall. And she was wearing this big, dark colored, maybe black dress. And so I was playing in that. And then the more we engage with details, then the more details we get. And so in this one, I was able to, then it was almost like a picture is real foggy and you can just see one corner of it. And then the more you engage with that corner and be like, oh, that's what this is, then the fog kind of releases from the rest of the picture and you can see the full picture of this scene. And so in this scene, my mother was leading or teaching or talking to a group of people. She was standing in front talking to a group of people, and there was maybe like 25 or 20 or 30 people, and it was men and women. And it was this feeling of like, this wasn't new for me, and it was something her and I did all the time, or she did, and I was just kind of along with her playing on the side. And she never was, it was interesting because I didn't get the feeling that she was like, sit down and be quiet, stop being so distracting. She was just very much would always take me for who I was at the age I was. So there I was, a toddler. So she's like, you're playing in my dress, whatever, that's fine. And it was this feeling of like, she didn't have anyone else to take care of me while she did this work. And she also always wanted me with her. I didn't know why during this scene, but it was this feeling of like, she doesn't want to leave me with this. She wants me to be there. And I was very much acting like a toddler, and she just totally accepted it for what it was. Like, that's what toddlers do. They move around and they make believe and they twirl around in dresses. And so that's what I was doing. And she was able to easily keep an eye on me because I was right beside her, and she was talking to these people. And she always just kind of like, it was this beginning sense of like her honoring me where I was at. So like in this scene, I was a toddler, but on some level, she would also like treat me like an equal, and she would teach me everything that she knew. So that's another reason why she wanted me was because she wanted me to learn what she knew so I could do the work that she was doing. And fully knowing that as an adult, she learns and absorbs information different than me as a toddler, but she still wanted me there to have that knowledge in my brain somewhere. Yeah, it was just a really easy, not arguing with the reality of life with a toddler, and really easy way that she was just going about it. And she wanted me to learn everything she was teaching. And so she was like, this is great. I'm a mom, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a healer, and she can come with and learn. And she never felt the need to like, oh, I'm a mom after I teach, and before I'm a mom tonight, I'm going to teach. And it was just this very blended way of living, and just like, I am using my gifts. and I am me, and I am tall, and I wear black dresses, and I have a little kid with me, and none of it had anything to do with what she was teaching. She was just showing up as herself, which to me is like a lesson, right? To me, right there was a lesson of like, oh, that's the calm, easy feeling of being like, this is who I am. And if you find this distracting, that's not really my problem, because it's not really that distracting. You can just sit there and listen to what I'm saying. It doesn't matter who's playing under my dress. And it was this really cool, casual, but like no BS way of going about life, which I don't know if that means anything to anyone else, but to me it was just like this really cool, like, oh, what a relaxed way to be while taking your work very seriously.
What are you doing there?
I'm just there because my mom's there. She always brings me. And she doesn't have anyone to leave me with, but she would want me there anyways. She kind of wants me to learn whatever she's teaching. She doesn't think she should have to separate being a mom and being a leader.
And then from here, Allison asked me a few different questions just to try to, again, you ask these questions more so as a way to get the client to engage with details so more details can come to them. And it's not that they're not important, because they're kind of the gateway to even more information. And if you're someone who likes to look up information, it can be helpful too. So she asked me where I was, and it was like this sense of like I'm in Spain. I don't know where I was in the entire country, but it was like I'm in Spain. My name was Marta, Marta, I believe. And I don't know what year it was, but in this first scene, again, I'm like a toddler. So I don't know, 2-3 years old maybe. And that was the gist of that scene. So then Allison cued me to go to the next significant scene in this life.
I'm outside. I'm 10 years old. And doing something with a tree, like standing by a tree.
So as the scene opened up, I was by a tree with my mother. And again, it's Marta's mother, it's not Gina's mother. I've had a handful of past lives with my own mother, which could be a podcast probably in its own. You know, it's those parent issues that really get us tangled up, which there's a whole purpose to that, which is actually a question I am going to answer on the next podcast episode, is like, why are parent issues so entangled so deep? But anyway, in this scene, I, as Marta, was in the forest, and we were bent over doing something kind of at the bottom of the tree, or maybe on the ground, like the root of the tree. I'm not so sure. But we were, I believe, getting bark or sap actually from the tree. So the purpose was we were getting this, and we were going to make like a tincture or a potion or a salve or something for someone who had paid us money. And basically what we were like foraging for herbs or mushrooms or other things in nature that we could distill down or give to people to help them with any sort of sickness or ailment that they might have. So that was actually what we were doing at that time, and we were together, and I was 10 years old. And there was this sense in this scene, I could get this sense from my mother that she could sense from me that I knew everything that she knew. So at the age of 10, being with her during all of her work from a very young age, or probably since birth, really, I had known at that point everything she knew. And she was proud of that, but also not overly proud or egotistical about it, because she really felt like she needed to teach me these things because she wasn't always going to be around. And she needed to teach me these things because it was very clear to her that it was her path in life to do this medicinal work and help people heal, and to teach me as her daughter how to do that work.
We make like potions, and this is for someone who's sick. We'll use this in some sort of drink to help someone who's sick. We teach people about herbs and different things, and we make stuff for people too.
First, did you hear that little ear flap shakeout? I about died when I was listening to this recording again, because that was my little dachshund that passed away off the earth plane in February, and I was so surprised to hear her little ear shake out. Yeah, she used to just lay there and be so sweet during my past life regressions, and she did bark once actually during the session, which was really unlike her. But I kept that in, so we'll talk about it when it gets there. So yeah, we not only helped people kind of one-on-one, but we also taught people about these herbs and how they can help special ailments. And so we were also, my mom wasn't only teaching me, but she was trying to teach other people in the community. But she just knew that she had a natural talent for this. I had a natural talent for this. So not only did we do the one-on-one work, but then we also, or she would also work with groups of people and teach them how to do these things themselves.
She tells me that I know everything that she knows. And that's what she wants. She feels like she won't always be here. She really feels like she's not going to be here long. Like, she couldn't wait till I was 30 to tell me. She had to teach me everything right away.
So she really felt like she had to teach me everything she knew as fast as she could, because it wasn't always guaranteed. I didn't get the feeling like it was sad or that she was sick, but it was just this sense of like, I don't know how long I'm going to be on Earth, and so I gotta teach this kid as much as I can. And so I learned faster than she thought, and then she was like, of course she did. This is her natural talent. This is my natural talent. This isn't like an ego thing. This isn't us. We're not so great. It was like, of course, duh. I don't know why I doubted it. That's why we're here. And it was just like, this is a knowledge that you gain over a lifetime. And because she was obviously older than me, being my mother, she wanted to squeeze as much of that in that time. And so it was just this constant learning. And she was really kind of like my safety net when she would teach me. So even at 10 years old, when I would be working, say, with a client, that obviously wasn't the language that we used back then, but she was always there. So it was almost got to a point where at the age of 10, I was foraging for things and she was just kind of watching me do it and letting me make errors that'll help me learn, but also errors that wouldn't like endanger anyone or make them not be safe or healthy. And so she was also always just kind of like my safety net. And this was an interesting piece for me because I would describe myself as like, I don't really appreciate authority. It makes me extremely uncomfortable and unhappy, to be honest. And I don't have the typical, or not even typical, but like the storybook mother-daughter, father-daughter relationship that's sold to us and that we're told if we don't have it, we should want it. And of course, when I was younger, I mean, I loved my parents and stuff, but I've never had this like loss of like, oh, I don't have the storybook version. I could really use a parent right now. I just have never felt that way. I've been I had a really great older sister. I don't know if that's why. But in general, when an authority figure is teaching me how to do something, in this life as Jina, it can be really uncomfortable. I've done a lot of healing since I've been in typical like corporate or school type situations where that's the case. So I have a feeling my experience would probably be pretty different from what it used to be, like when I was growing up in school and in my 20s, like in college, or, you know, early 30s, even in the corporate world. But I thought that was just interesting, which is so cool about a past life regression, is like we get to immerse ourselves in this way of being that can be so different from how we are now. And so it was really cool to experience this like really caring, nurturing, mother-daughter relationship, one that was like full of respect, yet I was never scared to make a mistake. I wasn't scared to get, you know, feedback that was negative. And so it's just a strength, a part of my soul that I feel like I lost at some point. I don't know if I lost it, you know, in the early 80s of this life as Jina, or did I lose it in a different life? But it was just really cool to like feel whole in that sense again, of like in this space of being like in the 10-year-old mindset. It was like, yeah, and if I fuck up, like this woman's gonna help me, my mom's gonna help me. And I've just never, I don't know, it's hard to explain like all of this. I feel like I say that all the time, but that is what's so neat about experiencing a past life too, is like you get this opportunity to be in a way that you don't have, where I feel like I don't have that ability right now. I have that ability more now than I ever have. But at the time, like a year ago, I had even less of it. And so it was a really cool, interesting, which I feel like I say cool and interesting all the time. But that's just how I explain it. It's so remarkable and refreshing, and just like, hey, that's a way of being too. And by calling that memory forward, then it's a way of being, and it's an actual memory. It's just like if I told you what it's like to hike Half Dome in Yosemite National Park in California, USA, you could be like, whoa, that sounds cool. Totally different if you've actually done it, right? Like one's logical, one you felt it in your body, and you can call on that memory, and you can call on those strengths, and you can call on that way of being at other times in your life. And it's just another spectacular thing about doing a past life regression.
You mentioned that she's teaching you knowledge of a lifetime, and she's taught you herbs and medicines and potions. What has she taught you about your abilities, your innate psychic energies and abilities?
A little barking in the background. What's so funny is I don't remember this, and I was the one in trance, so you think I would remember it, but I don't remember it. And so it was such a fun surprise, and I left it in here specifically to show people, because I don't know if you can hear it, but after she barks in my like deadpan voice, trance voice, I go, oh, Tootsie. And that's what I used to call her, was Tootsie, my little Tootsie Roll, because she was a little wiener dog. And it's really just shows that even though as a facilitator, I prefer to have a space that's like quiet, uninterrupted, no phones, no dump trucks, no beeping, no knocking on the doors, no footsteps above. Even though that's what I strive for, it's not necessary. And it just goes to show the power of the human mind again, because as anyone who wants to have any sort of hypnotic experience, whether it's emotional healing in this life or past life regression or life in between lives or communing with your spirit guides and your angels, is that all you need is a willing mind and open to having an experience. And with that, you are totally aware, like I was totally aware that that Lily was barking, but It did not pull me out of trance. It was just like, Lil. And that's what I would do. She was a very naughty dog. But toward the end, she just would sleep all the time. And so and the people who came over didn't mind her sleeping in the window. So it didn't matter, but I thought that was so interesting. I don't remember her barking, but clearly I acknowledged it on this. And it's just another example of how a lot of times people think like, oh, it was loud. What if it's loud? I might get pulled out. And it's like, no, you're not going to. And you're totally aware of what's going on. And you can get up and leave anytime, but why would you if you're having this great experience? And so that's why I left that in there. And because Lil was my best friend for 15 years, and I still sometimes get really sad that she's not with me. And so I just wanted to commemorate her in this podcast because she was just the baddest little bee. Okay, so to answer the question that Allison had asked me was, she had asked, what does Marta's mother in that past life, like, how did she go about teaching Marta or me how to use my psychic abilities, how to tap into my intuitive nature to help and heal these people?
When someone's sick, we put our hands on them to make them feel better, but then it also gives us information on the healing they need. So different properties that they need in the tonics and the creams and the stuff that they eat, and then we go and find that. But it's all intuition, and we just trust it.
So like I mentioned before, even at this young age of 10, my mother would kind of let me be in the driver's seat of these healing sessions. And so I would put my hands like on the back of their head, on their shoulders, on their arms, or if they had like a sore knee, I'd put it on the knee. And it wasn't like a doctor-patient situation where I was diagnosing a problem. It was really just, I was picking up the nature of the ailment, and then what I was doing was picking up also what needed to be put back into the system, the client's body essentially, to make it balanced or whole or healthy again. And then with that information, I would kind of, put that up against all of my knowledge and my mother's knowledge of the different plants and flowers and trees and all the things in the forest. So matching the properties they need with the properties I knew where to get them. And then we would either make them, like we would go forage for those things, and then somehow make a salve or a tincture or some sort of drink for them to take in for a specific amount of time for them to heal and be whole again. And my mom, again, was letting me kind of drive, but she was always my safety net. So in part with that, in the sense of like, well, how did I intuitively know? Part of it was knowledge, just like, okay, I know these properties help these things, right? And this is where you get those properties, and this is how you should ingest it or put it on your skin or whatever. Like some of it is just knowledge from experience, knowledge from my mother and her experience and whoever she learned it from, right? And knowledge from past clients. But then there was also the intuitive feeling in my body in which I would know whether I was on the right track or not. So in the sense of like the question of what does it feel like when I'm using intuition or tapping into my gifts or say a psychic ability. And for me, it feels like, and what it felt like in this past life regression was, it felt like kind of happy bubbles, kind of like really light, uplifting, kind of bubbly sensation that would start kind of in my lower abdomen and go up into my chest. And it wasn't like an uncomfortable gas bubble feeling. It was just like this effervescent feeling that traveled like the length of my torso, like starting on the lower part and working up into my chest. And so I would touch the people's shoulders or arms and get kind of intuitive hits and feel, and I would know I was on the right track when I would have these feelings of bubbling within me. And what's so interesting is, like I've said before, in trance, our senses are heightened. They're heightened in terms of memory and how we experience things. They're just heightened. So in that past life scene where I was working with a man who was a client and my mother was there with me, I was feeling this effervescent kind of bubbly feeling in my trunk part of my body. And I also was able to recall a memory in this life as Jina as to when I would feel that. And it was so crazy because if you would have asked my conscious mind prior to that session, when have you felt this feeling? I would have been like, never, which was the whole point of the session, was like, I felt like I didn't have any connection to it. And because your memory is so keen and your senses are so dialed in, I was able to be like, oh, and here's where I used to feel that all the time. And I can look back, one of the jobs that I've had I'm just someone who has had a lot of jobs. And for the majority of my adult life, I had more than one job, sometimes more than 2 or 3 jobs. But so I've got a lot of work experience behind me. But I remember one of my jobs that I had was actually managing corporate fitness centers. So this is like, an athletic gym within a company's big building. And I loved that job because of the freedom, and I was the manager, so I was in charge. Of course I love that. I love being in charge. And it was so cool because a big part of my job was like socializing with the members. I thought the members were cool. I loved being able to train people and help people troubleshoot like their aches and pains and back that up against my massage and kind of like my knowledge of muscles and all of that, and be like, oh, you must have a knot here. Let's work out that knot. Here's how you can do it on your own. And when I think back to it, it is one of my favorite jobs that I ever had. There was more than one reason why I had to get out of that job. I don't necessarily want that job now, but when I look back on it with this information, it's like, oh shit, I used to get that feeling all the time. And it was essentially doing body work with clients, helping clients do their own body work. And that was such a revelation and just so cool to be like, oh, and that's another reason why I liked that job. Very cool. And so I was able to not only embody that knowledge from the past life as Marta, but also to clearly see it. Oh, I have seen that and I have done that in my life as Jina. And that's why I liked certain jobs more than other jobs, because I was able to access it and be in the flow of my gifts. And so the way it would go in this life as Marta was I would have my hands on them, using my hands to give healing energy and get messages from their physical body, their mind, their spirit. And when I would get an idea or an intuitive hit that was in alignment with their ailment, what they needed, what was actually wrong, where I could get what they needed, how often they needed to do the thing in order to heal, that is when I would get the warm bubbles. And then when I would come upon the right healing method, warm, effervescent bubbles in my trunk again. And when they were healed with my recommendations, again, that affirmation of like warm, kind of effervescent bubbles. And then in addition to that, I had like some emotions and other things that were a little bit more like inside my head rather than inside my body, of kind of this sense of like just being clicked in the right space, being on the right path, in alignment with the client and the vessel that they are and what they needed, and the tools and the knowledge and the properties that I had that I could help them with.
I have my hands on their shoulders, and then I have my hands on the back of their neck. And it's this feeling of, it's like this mixture of excitement and compassion and teamwork between me and them, even though they're not consciously doing anything. It's kind of their subtle mind and their subtle body, just their energy field is telling me what they need. And I just get this picture in my head of like what's being blocked or what's tight or what healing needs to take place. So if it's warming, if it's certain elements that are in different planets.
And I know in a past episode I've talked about how a lot of times intuition and imagination can look a lot alike. And sometimes that doesn't matter, right? Like, oh, my imagination, I thought of writing this story and so I wrote it and now it's a bestseller book. Or sometimes people are like, they doubt themselves. Like, should I do A or B? And they're like, well, should I do A, or is that just my mind telling me I should do it because of, a different reason? And the message that is clear that I've gotten from my guides is that intuition and imagination are they're similar. They're not exactly the same thing, but they can, to an untrained mind, a mind that's not used to discerning between the two, they can look identical. And then it's hard to be like, well, which is which, right? And that's where I was a little over a year ago when I was trying to figure all of this out. Like, well, what is really intuition? What is my soul guiding me forward? And what's just like pure imagination that has been essentially trained by the culture that I live in? And it was really the message I got from my guides was like, they can look the same, but what's really important is the difference in how it feels emotionally, how it feels physically. So for me personally, that is like that effervescent feeling in my torso. And then also these feelings of like compassion and excitement and teamwork. All of these things, the only way I can describe it, and it's not totally like it, but all of these things give me this feeling of like, if I'm walking on a path and I have an idea, an intuitive idea feels similar to what I just explained, right? Those positive emotions, the effervescent feeling within me. And this is like a feeling of like, instead of walking slowly on a planet, on a path with a gravitational pull, I am lifted and I'm just floating forward really quickly. And that is the difference. And so you can, of course, you can do a session like this and try to figure out what that feels like to you in your personal body with your personal soul and physical body makeup and your genetics and all of that. Everyone's a little bit different. Or you can just kind of test it yourself. Like, oh, I'm feeling an intuitive hit to take this route to work. And then you can kind of reflect back on your day. Oh, how did that feel? Did it matter? Was there an accident on your current route? You can do these little things like, oh, I'm being called to wear this sweatshirt today. And then look back at the end of the day and be like, well, I wore it. What happened? Was I glad I wore it? Oh, I'm being called to bring an extra pair of socks. Was I glad I brought it? Did it not matter? And you can kind of do these experiments on your own, in your own mind, and it doesn't take that long. But that is kind of what I want to call out again, is that imagination and intuition can seem similar, and they are very similar, but they might feel totally different in your body. And it's about figuring out what that feels like for you, and then looking for that in your decision making and your action planning. So back to the scene at hand. I am Marta with my mother, and we are doing these healing practices with one-on-one with individual clients. We are doing it, teaching it on a wide level with groups of people, men and women, maybe like about 30 people each, and just teaching people how we do things. And then with cases that are a little bit more hairy or a little bit more painful, or the person needs help a little bit quicker or just wants that assistance, then they come to us. And being in the community that we were in, around the people that we were, we were pretty far removed from like a large population, but there was a lot of like smaller communities or, you know, small settled towns around us that they could get to us. So some people would travel to us, but a lot of people lived around us, and sometimes we would travel to them. But word was getting out, and we had no shortage of work to do.
And because we help these people, we were like popular among certain groups, but we don't think about that, and we just focus on our work. And so we haven't trained our brains to think about how other people are thinking about us. And that's a big reason why we're so good at what we do, is because we just trust ourselves and we don't second guess it based on what we think other people are thinking.
This is so simple and beautiful. It's like they don't even use any sort of bandwidth in their brain to manage the perception that other people have of them, or to worry about what other people may or may not think of them. They literally use their entire mind, body, and spirit to enjoy their life, enjoy the work they do, use their gifts, and if someone has an issue, they don't even know. They don't concern themselves with it. And one of the reasons was like as Marta, I really got the feeling it was like that wasn't even a question. It was just like a way of being. How we learn how to be from our parents. Now, sometimes we have to grow up and unlearn how to be from our parents. That was not Marta's experience. But it was just like, that's just not something you think about. Just like as a hypnotist, I'm not worried about how to drive a city bus. I don't have to. I wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want me to. And to think about it or to worry about it doesn't have anything to do with the work I'm doing. And actually worrying about something I can't control or have no business in only takes away from the work I'm supposed to be doing. And this is huge for me as Jina, because I have grown up as a chameleon. It was really, for whatever reason growing up, I felt like I needed to manage people's emotions. It was a survival technique. It was a comfort technique. And that has been a really hard habit to shake as an adult. Now I do my best to not consciously try to manipulate people's feelings or get people to think a certain way about me so I'm accepted. And even though I can say I've let go a lot of that, it is still something I think about. Uh-oh, I had to do this. What's that person going to think? Oh gosh, they probably think I'm so stupid. Oh no, what if I have to do A and B this week? This person's going to think I'm insert negative attribute. And it's like, really, what I do know about people and all the research I've done, reading, learning, working with people, is that most people aren't even really thinking about us, right? It's like that rule of like, people think about you for a minute and then they stop thinking about you. And there's only so much damage that can be done in a minute. And so for me, even though this was like 1% of the entire experience of this past life regression, again, it was a way of being to be like, oh, no, I don't think about that stuff. And I'm absolutely not going to think about that stuff because that's going to take away from my natural gifts and the work I'm doing, which for, 2019 Jina, 2018 Jina was like, yep, I needed to hear that. I needed to embody that mentality. Thank you. So I'd be curious to know if that's something you struggle with or not. It's like managing these, not even managing or worrying about your perception to other people when none of it really matters. Ugh, it's so taxing. And it takes away so much from life. Okay, so moving on from that scene, we went then to the final scenes of my life as Marta. And in this scene, when the scene opened up, only thing I saw was a knife. And again, it's an example of not questioning it, not judging it, leaning into it, engage with the details and go, okay, a knife. All right. And then Allison asked me, is someone holding the knife? And then I got a clear picture of a man holding a knife.
I just see a knife and I'm in the woods.
Who's holding the knife?
It's a man. He doesn't like the work I'm doing. It scares him. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like that he says, it's like he doesn't like that I have this power. I don't really think of it as power. I think of it as just like a gift to help people.
So this was another really good example of how the client in the chair who is in trance shares, I don't know, going through training, they gave, a catch-all percentage. Like they're sharing like 10% of what they're actually experiencing. And that's why I encourage my clients to journal about it, just like write down everything you remember. Because while I take notes and while I record the session, I am not in their mind. So I'm only getting the things that they verbalize. But as the client in the chair, you're experiencing a lot more. So that's how I described that scene to Allison, the facilitator of this session. But for me, the way I saw it was like I first saw the knife, and then I saw the man, and then I saw me from the point of view from the man. And it was so easy to sneak up on me because I was totally focused on my work, just like in the flow of foraging in the forest. And he thought that it would be a lot more difficult to get me, but I was just like, a sitting duck. Like I didn't even think about him coming, which I guess is the shadow side of not worrying about other people's perceptions. Is I guess you could get taken down when you're, least expect it. But we don't live in that world anymore, at least not today, in this day in October of 2019. That is not the day that we live in. Hopefully those days are over. But I was foraging in the woods, and then he came up behind me. And trigger warning, this is the death scene. So if you don't want to get the details of the death scene, please forward about a minute. It's about a minute description.
He stabs me in the back. And I don't die right away.
What are you thinking?
This is so dumb. It didn't have to be like this. I'm like, can't get up, but my face is like in the leaves. There's like bugs around me. I just lay there for a long time. It just seems like such a waste.
So that's like all I could think of when I was laying there. It was like, what the fuck with these people? Like, this is such a waste. This is such a waste of my education. This did not need to happen. People need to be helped, and now they're not going to get helped. And it was just this really rational way of being like, ugh, what the fuck? And what I think is interesting is a lot of times I get a question of like, well, I'm afraid of what I'm going to see in a past life. And if you take even just, I'm on episode 7, I've had many deaths where it did not end well. And your subconscious mind, my subconscious mind, saves us. It's my belief and my experience. Our subconscious mind is also there to protect us. And it's the reason why we can have irrational fears. It's our subconscious mind believes a story and it's enacting that story because it feels like you're going to die, I'm going to die if it doesn't. And so in these death scenes, a lot of times we're only getting the emotions and the details and the essence of these scenes, A, that we can handle, and B, that are going to help us for our highest and greatest good. And so do I believe that Marta was stabbed and was laying there like cool as a cucumber, just a little bit upset? Absolutely not. That would be terrifying and that would be awful, and all the other emotions that would go with that. But what I believe is that the subconscious mind allows through the gate things that are going to help us in our lives in that moment that we're experiencing it. And I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but this past life scene I have come back to spontaneously in a breathwork workshop, and was able to do additional healing and felt another layer of emotion from that past life scene. And so we always get what we need, and we don't get more than we can handle. And it's not that we never experience trauma or terror or scary things. It's that if it's not here for us now to dive in, I just don't think it's going to happen. And I have had past life scenes where someone has killed me, and I did feel frightened and terror, but it wasn't at a level that I couldn't happen. There was no emotional flooding. I was able to feel it, but stay grounded in the moment and know that I was safe. I also believe that it is the work of a good facilitator, a facilitator with integrity, to know when their client is experiencing a lot of emotion and then coach them through, you're safe, you can move toward it if you want to, we can back off and heal it in a different way. And that is the great thing about having a facilitator that you trust. So again, I just wanted to point that out because I think the subconscious mind is not only giving us these memories, but it's also shielding us from things that we don't need to experience again. I don't need to experience the terror and the fright and maybe the rage of, I just had to get enough to get the idea, to get the healing in that instance that I needed in October of 2018 and move on. So from that scene, then Allison had asked me, anything else coming up as you're laying there, as the soul is leaving your body?
I wish it didn't end like that, but I wouldn't do anything different. It's like you can do all this good work and someone's always got a problem with it. And I can't believe it that he actually killed me.
Okay, so Allison had asked me some other details about kind of like who Marta was in this life. And so at the time I was like in my 40s, had been doing this work my entire life, and my mother was long since passed away. It wasn't like a fresh wound in that memory or anything like that. And my final thoughts as I passed outside my body was like, all this good work and someone's got a problem with it, and I can't believe he killed me. Ugh. And it was just, again, like I said in that recording, was like such a waste. Just, this is such a waste. Why are we doing this? If he has a problem with me, ask me about it. You know, that's not the times that they lived in. But for me, it's important as someone who does work that's like a little out there, and I'm sure some religious people would have a real problem with it, which they wouldn't have to because it's non-denominational and whatever. My defense is in my defenselessness. Like, I don't need to defend it. The work I do is on the up and up. I feel good about it. I am someone of high integrity. And there are going to be people who have a problem with it, who think it's the devil's work. It's absolutely not. And so for for that, it's a good reminder for me to be like, I am carrying the baggage of a soul memory where I was hunted down for this. And that is the irrational fear, and I can let that go. I can still be aware. It is my natural ability as Jina, my natural reflex to read people, and not like in a real psychic way, but to kind of get a feel for their perception of me. And my practice is to let that go. But I can also lean on it as a real gift and be like, I can let it go unless there's like some real red flags and I'm in danger. And so it's about letting that go and trusting who I am today to be able to identify a dangerous situation in the moment today. And then I can release the baggage of this is going to happen, everything's bad, I'm going to get killed for my work. Because that is the what was really at the core of a lot of fear I had about talking about past life regression and hypnosis when I was doing it for myself as a healing modality when I was a wellness coach and consultant. It was just a part of me that I never shared with anyone. But it did seep into my work. I talked a lot about happiness and mindset and the stories we tell ourselves and our excuses and leaning into them. And all of these things already made people feel weird because it was like, oh, you're trying to get people to talk about emotions at work. And so being in that environment where I was already looked at as weird, and I would just be like, shit, if these people really knew how weird I am, they would be like, get the fuck out of our building. But so really in coming into this work as someone who facilitates past life regression sessions, that was really unwinding and releasing a lot of those layers of fear. And we need fear as humans, we need fear. This is not about never having fear. It's about knowing when it's an irrational thing from baggage in the past that's no longer serving us. Maybe it served us one day, but it's no longer serving us, or fear that we really need to pay attention to right now. And we are really at risk for something, whether it's physical harm or mental harm or it's something else. But for me, it was really just like, again, letting that go, trusting who I am today, being in my power as Jina, being aware of my powers and trusting those powers. And that is a lot less stressful than always looking behind your back, waiting to get the axe. So we can experience this trauma or this baggage, again, like in your operating system, in your mind, the stories we tell ourselves, the irrational fears that we have, or just, kind of runaway emotions that end up making us feel depleted, making us feel like shit, ruining our relationships, causing self-sabotage. Again, it's not bad to have negative emotions. It actually helps us, keeps us safe, helps us grow, make changes in our lives. But when we ruminate and when we have no control over a reaction and it's actually harming our life, that's when we want to go in and dissect them. And so like I've been explaining, we can get into these thought patterns and these stories, right, that then lead to poor decisions or not great action. But we can also carry these things in our physical body. And there are some thoughts that say this can lead to disease, injury in this life, even though the trauma happened in a past life. So Allison and I identified, like, where are you feeling this in your body, Jina? And I, of course, was feeling it in my neck and in my back, like where the knife went in. And it's so interesting because where the knife went in is like where I have a lot of like chronically tight muscles in my back, which can lead to migraines or, at best case scenario, a tension headache. And it's something I'm always working with. And anyways, so she took me through an exercise and we breathed it out. We did some visualization. And again, more information on healing this in your physical body in that episode 3 of the Anatomy of a Session. So you can use different healing modalities, and we did that. And it took up almost 10 minutes of the session of like visualizing and breathing it out of my body. And I can say in the last year, the throat constriction, I hesitate to say it's totally gone because I don't want to jinx it. I don't want it back. But I haven't experienced that in a really long time. And that particular knot in my back that used to cause so much dull pain. Like, it would just cause so much dull pain in my back. Now, listening to this a year later, I have not experienced that in a while. So that's another healing modality we can do right after the death scene. So as you know, after the death scene, we move to a safe spiritual space where you can get guidance and insights. And we get that from our higher self, from our guides, from angels, whether we have a strong connection that we believe we have a strong connection to or not. We're always connected to those things. And so this is a space where we can get even more guidance as to like why we had this past life experience, or answer some other questions. So like I go over in episode 3 in the anatomy of a session, just a reminder, this is also the space where I'm like, hey client, if you have a question that you wouldn't maybe ask a psychic right now, this is where you ask it. Because an intuitive person, a communicator, a psychic, whatever you want to call it, what they're reading is your higher self, your guides, the angels, the energy around you, the energy in your field. And you have access to that. You are wide open to that when you're in trance, especially when you're in trance after all the mental gymnastics and opening of your subconscious mind of going through a few different scenes in your past life. Like, you are open, ready, and willing. So that is where we ended up. And at that time, Allison had asked me, are there any patterns in your life as Marta that are similar to your life as Jina? And is there any guidance or insights from your higher self or guides?
Or what are some of the most important lessons you need to remember from this life and your current life as Jina?
There's a fear of saying exactly what I think in terms of my views around the work I choose, and just automatically thinking that even if most people don't reject it, the ones who do will make a bigger difference in limiting my ability to do the work, or my ability to get paid to do the work. There's a pattern in the past for being killed or punished for my ways of thinking, since they aren't in the norm of society. And so I think that I carry that today. But I don't have to. No one's gonna kill me because of that. It's just not the world we live in.
And the mantra that came in, or the statement that came in as like the reminder of this lesson of what I need today and who Marta was, and if I had, fractured that part of my soul, there's a thought where you can actually, a piece of your soul like gets left somewhere, and then the technique to go get it is actually called soul retrieval, which I could do an episode on soul retrieval. Let me know if you want to know about that. So there is this piece of like going back to get this part of your soul. And sometimes we just feel like you would use that session, for example, if you feel like, it seems like everybody around me has the ability to X, whatever, still be themselves even though they're fearful, or be themselves and not be fearful. And it's like, I just don't even know how to do that, or I don't even know who I am, or I don't know how to get back to that. You can go and do a soul retrieval and figure out where you left that, where that got taken from you, and you can actually go get it back, which is, I've done something like that before. It was pretty cool. I'll do an episode on that. Let me know if you want to hear more about soul retrieval. Anyway, the mantra that came out of this, of like how to get that back to you, how to get more of it, how to get more Marta into my life and her work ethic. And it was just simply like eyes on the work. Eyes on the work. Not eyes scanning the horizon for what other people might be feeling or thinking or saying about you. Do the work. Focus on the work. And at the time, I was just putting together my website, about to launch it. I am, of course, a total bootstrapper, so I was doing it all myself, which is fine. I kind of like that creative space and that work. And it just came up like eyes on the work, eyes on the work, eyes on the work. And it was so loud and it was so strong. And I call it my Marta mantra. It's just like eyes on the work. So instead of being like, oh, what do I want people to think about me? And then I'll use that as the seed from which I will make my website decisions. Instead, with the eyes on the work Marta mantra, it's like, and what kind of website do my people need? And what services do they need? And what classes do they need? And what recordings do they need? And my work is really just to channel what they need and show up with it. And they'll come. And it's not like I'm here to heal the world. It's that sense of like, get to know yourself, Jina. Get to heal yourself, Jina. Share your journey. People will identify it. Those are your people. And it's not just me. I think that's kind of like I think that's part of the human experience, is like we go on a journey trying to find our gifts, trying to heal some shit, trying to figure some stuff out, trying to get some stuff in our lives. And when we are using our gifts and in the flow of that journey on that path, that is when opportunities and people and other things that we need to flourish with our gifts become attracted to us. And it seems so simple, but to have that reprogrammed like that in my mind was incredibly helpful. It was so insightful, so impactful, and was like a reboot on my operating system, because now I operate from a different source, which is going to get me something else besides my old anxious way of leading with fear, leading with perception, my ego, and really having fear and my ego in the driver's seat. And that does not lead to a life that feels good. At least that's my experience. And so for me, this was a real reboot to my internal operating system on a shift in how I see the world and how I operate and how I take action and make decisions. So before we wrapped up this space of spiritual guidance, then Allison had asked, before we come back to the present moment, is there anything else, any other guidance that is for Jina at this time?
Meditate specifically on the energy of Marta. Just feel that wisdom and quiet confidence. And just try to embody more of that and just feel it. And when I'm meditating, if a mantra comes in or words come in, then just maybe write them down and say them. But to meditate on her energy, just to get that to grow within me.
This was such a good reminder, because while I have had thoughts and memories of this life and like chose the memory of feeling a certain way in situations where I'm not feeling that way or I want to feel that way, and that has helped, but I kind of forgot, honestly, and this is a great reason why you should go back and re-listen to your recording or re-look through your journal notes after you have a session, is that we forget. Other things kind of get the spotlight and we forget about certain things. And I forgot about this meditation thing. And all you have to do, you don't have to get fancy. I mean, you could even do it with your eyes open, standing in line at the post office or the bank. I mean, if people ever go to those places anymore. And you can just like think about it. And it's really that science of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is your brain and your nerve pathway ability to build new nerve pathways or strengthen already established nerve pathways for ways of moving, physical movements, emotional states of being, thought patterns, things like that. It's how you can get better at like aim if you were, doing archery or pitching or trying to hit a bullseye. That's all neuroplasticity. And so by just thinking of it and really immersing yourself totally, all of your thoughts around that way of being would be so beneficial of just upping your ability to naturally be that way. And that's another thing with past life regression is when we are experiencing a really tangled layer issue that we can just sense, like this affects us in so many ways. Oftentimes it has more than one source and you have to go digging for it. And I'm not saying you have to keep going back to past life regression. I'm saying find a healing technique. If you do a healing technique and you feel a little better, but now the flavor is something else and you want to heal it and you think therapy might be a good thing, or emotional healing through hypnosis is a good thing, or breath work would be a good thing, or energy healing yoga class would be a good thing, or going to a Reiki person. I mean, the options are endless. You just have to get in touch with, hey, I think I need this now. Or maybe you go back and do the same thing over and over like me. I don't know. I also try other things, but past life regression has been just so successful for me that it's an easy way to be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about this. I'm going to go experience a past life. And so by participating in that meditation, you can just really increase your body, your mind, your spirit's ability to just be steeped in that way of being, so it becomes even more natural, even more automatic, even more who you are to the core. Okay, so wrapping up that spiritual guidance piece before we come back to the present moment, that's when Allison inserted some really great hypnotic suggestions. So because you are there and your subconscious mind is wide open, it's a really good time to just insert some suggestions to help your mind take a different path, take a different track. And so the suggestions that she had given me was really around permission to embrace my truth, permission to embrace my knowledge, my skills, my abilities, and to just continue to unlock those feelings within my body. So I know when I'm in alignment. I know when I'm being led by my heart, my soul, my intuition. And just to remember to feel the freedom and the good that comes with that. And I think the real key there was like permission to embrace my truth, my knowledge, my skills, my abilities. And it just really reminds me of, I have a twin sister and we sound exactly the same. I want to do a podcast episode with her, but I feel like people would be like, I can't tell who's talking. So I got to get over that hump. But I have a twin sister and she has a toddler who, of course, the toddler is, acts out like toddlers do. And the toddler said something like, I don't like you, or something like that. If you have a toddler, you've been there, right? And Jess said something that was so great. And she was like, it doesn't matter to me if you like me. My job is to like me. That's my job. If you like me, great. But my job is to like me. And I'm like, shit. Like, we all need to hear that, right? Instead of, for me personally, getting so wrapped up in what other people may or may not be thinking about me. No, it's my job to like me. It's my job to embrace my truth, my knowledge, my skills, my ability, and do them to the best that I can. And anyone else who has a reaction to that, that's their path. I'm not on their path, right? And so I can see I've definitely gotten better at that in the last year. But of course, I'm a human, so I still got work to do. But man, does it feel good to be like, wow, I am not in the position I was a year ago. And I will take that. So that was my life as Marta. And that was the first encounter I had with her. Like I mentioned before, I did a breathwork workshop or class with Amy Koretsky in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And doing that breath work, if you go Google Amy Koretsky, click on her breath work, and you will find her description of it. But the way I describe it is like using your breath, you get into a trance state and you're able to like release emotional blockages, buildups in your body. And so in one breathwork session, I had spontaneously gone to the death scene of Marta. And it's real hard to explain, but like if you could see my hands right now, I'd be overlapping them like a fan out. And it was Marta and Kat from, I believe that was episode 5. And it was like they both died in a forest. They died different ways. They were doing different work, but it was still real witchy work that they were persecuted for. And I had such an emotional experience calling back the parts of my soul that were left on the forest floor. And that alone needs its own episode. So I'm not going to go into it here. But what I will say is, if you're interested and you don't want to miss it, go to pastlivesandthedivine.com/subscribe and get on the email list. And what I will say there is like, it's just another example of we heal in layers, I believe. And we peel the layer that we're ready to peel. And we get the insights that will give us the footing for the next step. And it was so interesting being able to go back and kind of heal more on 2 different death scenes at the same time. And it was incredible. And I can't wait. I get so excited when I record these episodes. I'm just like, oh, I can't wait for it to get out. And I can't wait for that one to get out because I'm going to record it very soon. But you probably won't see it for a couple months. We got some other ones in the queue. So just hang on tight. All right, that is our episode for today. Thank you so much for hanging in with me all the way to the end. And I hope this was helpful for you on some level. And just as much, I hope it was entertaining and fun and something you enjoyed today. And thank you again for listening. I really appreciate those ears. And if you like this podcast and want to give us a little support or a little boost, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review wherever you're listening to it, on Apple Podcasts or wherever. And maybe even if you thought of a friend while you were listening to this, the best way for me to get this out is for you to go, that was really cool. I enjoyed listening to that. I think this person would like it, or some version of those statements. And then you forward the episode to someone. I would so appreciate it. And I really thank you in advance. And of course, as always, thanks for being open to the power of your past lives, the power of my past lives, and all of our eternal soul experiences while we walk this earth together. As always, take anything from this episode that makes you feel better and just leave the rest.